I cannot remember what page we're on, but I know that we did 88 and 89. Let's see. Here we go. We're on 99, page 99. Um, okay, so we're still on the blood here. So basically, 90 through 109 is Paulette Sutton discussing the blood stain and scene reconstruction rebuttal. This is the latest document that was just released this April in the Brian Kohberger case. So it is the blood stain and scene reconstruction rebuttal, and it begins with Sutton's rebuttal to Matt Nodal and Brent Turvey. If you guys remember, it starts with drip trails, and it says that a continuous drip trail is more indicative of a bleeding person than a weapon passively dripping, small number drops. Then 91 through 95 was about work through individual. Nodal claims about particular stains, sample numbering, spatter interpretation, expirated blood. So that's just a review of what we did go over. Diluted blood, and then the detailed heavy pages, which is where Sutton often narrows and corrects or contextualizes earlier statements instead of abandoning them outright. So, and then 96 through 100 are some of the most important pages for everything, and it's because Sutton addresses the lack of obvious blood transfers leaving the room, and the lack of large visible blood deposits in expected areas. And the thing is, her answer is essentially that the absence of visible transfer does not let you reliably conclude that what the offender must have looked like or carried per se away. And so that scene-specific variables matter. So her answer is essentially that absence of visible transfer does not let you reliably conclude what the offender must have looked like or carried away, and that scene-specific variables matter, basically. And then 101, 103 turns to Turvey's points about the lack of blood in Kohberger's vehicle or residence. And then Sutton says the absence of documented transfer can have multiple explanations, including limited transfer in the first place, or cleaning before later searches. So they kind of go back and forth on that because basically the state says, well, the lack of blood can be due to the fact that he just cleaned, just was very meticulously cleaned his vehicle and so forth, which is, even if you meticulously clean, it's very rare that you don't find anything, generally. Even though they did find some transfer, but it wasn't enough to. Sutton, then 104 through 106, that discusses the bedding, the comforter, then the movement, comforter movement, the bedding, fur outside the bedrooms, and then the relative positions of Ethan and Xana. These pages are about reconstructive possibilities and not certainties. Pages 107 through 109 address the knife sheath and reject a confident staging conclusion. So Sutton says there's no physical evidence proving that one sheath placement scenario over another, and pushes back on the claim that the sheath's condition proves it was planted or on involvement in a violent bloodletting event. This article clearly supports Sutton's broader rebuttal themes, so that's why they utilized it. And then 115 through 116 was about Katie White CODIS, which was CODIS. It begins with her rebuttal and explains what CODIS is and what profiles can be entered, and Idaho's participation rules. This section is about database procedure, basically, and it's not dramatic case narrative. 116 continues with who's eligible for CODIS and entry, and how putative perpetrator profiles are treated, basically. So it explains why a crime scene profile can be uploaded, and what legal framework it governs. So let me see here. Let's go to 116. Okay, so DNA profiles that are believed to be attributable to the putative perpetrator are eligible for entry into CODIS. DNA profiles attributable to victims and non-probative individuals and items without an established link to the crime scene are not allowed to be entered. So what they're trying to say is that the blood that was found inside the glove, because it was outside the crime scene, and there was no victim blood in it, it can't be utilized. I mean, they didn't have to put it in CODIS, or they couldn't put it in CODIS. The lab must justify entry of every profile put into CODIS, and many factors can influence eligibility. For a large crime scene, not all locations within the scene are always weighed equally in probative value. So also the unknown male blood, because it wasn't mixed with victim blood, I guess they didn't bother to put it in. But see, this sheet had the victim's blood and the DNA transfer, so that's their excuse. But I think that's irrelevant in my opinion. If you're going to investigate and do really do your job and clear the, assure that there's no others, they should be able to put it in there. So it's very common to locate non-probative biological stains within residencies. So their excuse is due to everyday activities such as consensual, this and that, small injuries, lack of cleanliness, evidence located closer to a point of entry, a disturbed area, or a victim will typically be considered of higher probative value. So they're trying to say that the knife sheath was of higher probative value than the other. Right. Then the unknown male. So there's your answers. They're saying that because it was not, the victim's blood was not with the unknown male blood in the glove, and so in the glove and the unknown male on the stairway, they didn't bother with it. That's stupid. I mean, that's just my opinion. They just say that it's not the highest probative value was the knife sheath, basically, in their opinion, right? So that's what they're saying. For this case, a knife sheath next to one of the victims produced an unknown male profile. The victims were believed to have been stabbed to death, and the sheath's proximity to the victim's body provided the strongest link to a potential perpetrator. So the residence where the crime occurred is heavily trafficked by college students. And the location of the blood spot on the underside of a handrail, male B, does not in itself indicate a link to the crime. A gardening-style glove located outside the residence in a publicly accessible area produced an additional unknown male profile, which was D. No DNA attributable to the victims was located on this item, and a direct link to the crime could not be established. Had DNA from one or more of the victims been located on this item, it likely would have been CODIS eligible. At that time, CODIS eligibility was determined that male DNA profiles A, B, and D were unidentified, and it was not possible for lab staff to know who would ultimately be linked to any one item. The CODIS eligibility determination was strictly made based on an evaluation of the probative value of each item. So there's your answers on why the state did not pursue the unknown male DNA.